Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 193, part 1 of the Quickie Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hopkins, and if you don't know already, you probably saw it's kind of a big deal, this one. I don't often get nervous before an interview, but you'll definitely hear it in my voice in the beginning few minutes of this episode. I was a little bit shaky, a little bit off my game, a little bit nervous. This was fun. This was such a fun interview. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I know that this particular guest is extremely busy and is highly sought after. So the little old Quickie Podcast has quite the big name guest today. So let's get to it. If you haven't seen already, today's guest is Paula Scher. She is a designer and a partner at Pentagram. She's also a painter. She is very creative and very talented and has great stories to share. This is the beginning, that Paula Scher story. We talk about how she did not come from a creative family, a family of scientists, actually. So she was kind of the odd one out in the beginning, pursuing the creative field. She didn't actually know what graphic design was until college. Paula tells us about the teacher who wasn't very nice to her while she was back in school there and asking, why is she there? Why is she involved with design? What is she trying to do? And then later in her career, actually called her back to speak to his design class. She talks about what that was like. She then also tells us about another teacher, but this teacher was the one that changed her life. She talks about how that all happened. She shares with us the most influential designs and projects that she has seen out there in the world. She shares a very new book that she just saw out and about and she had to buy as soon as she saw it. Talks about why. We also talk about the designers and creatives that she looks up to right now and why. She tells us about the packaging project that she was a part of and why she is so proud of it. And how she arrived on good old-fashioned Swiss Helvetica as the font for this packaging project. We then talk about the Swatch Watch project that landed her in the design history books, not necessarily for the right reasons, actually. She tells us about joining Pentagram as the first woman partner and what that was like. We talk about some recent situations where projects she was a part of got canceled, and how that makes her feel when that happens. She then tells us about the design project that makes her heart absolutely sing, but also the one project that she created that is out there in the world that she hates, overtly hates, and that is the word she used. We talk about the importance of print and print design and how she deals with online criticism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is jam-packed, so let's get to it. Paula Scher. Here we go.
Welcome to the Quickie Podcast, the daily interview show where we talk to graphic designers about their journey to the creative field. And we do it in 30 minutes or less. So, are you ready for a Quickie?
Paula, welcome to the Quickie Podcast.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing terrific. So the first question on the Quickie Podcast is, are you ready for a Quickie?
Sure.
Sure, why not? So yeah, let's get into the tough stuff. Briefly tell the listeners about yourself.
My name is Paula Scher. I live in New York City. I've been married for on and off for 50 years. I'm a graphic designer. I also a painter and very often a teacher. All of those things.
All of those things and sometimes at the same time.
And a partner of Pentagram.
Perfect. So being in New York, I was there with my wife back in, we're about 2 years ago in May now. Give me your top 3 favorite restaurants.
Oh, that's hard. They change all the time. Right now, I love this place called Sushi Now, which is really a traditional Japanese-style sushi restaurant. Absolutely fantastic sushi. I love Danny Meyer's restaurants. I love Union Square Cafe, and I love Gramercy Tavern, and I love the restaurant The Modern that's in MoMA. And I like Shake Shack.
Oh, classic. I had my first Shake Shack experience in New York, so I was pretty happy about it.
Well, I designed that identity. So
I didn't know at the time, but I found out after. Incredible. So I want to dive back into your childhood a little bit here, Paula. What was your childhood like? Do you feel that you had a creative childhood that pointed you in this career path?
Interestingly enough, I was creative in a family that was not especially creative. I had a father and brother who were both scientists, and they were thinkers. They certainly had creative minds. A mother who was a school teacher and taught history, and certainly prepared me for the civics lessons of today. And I was different, and I used to draw and paint in my room, especially when I felt different, when I had family fights or when I wanted to hide. That's what I did.
Mm-hmm. So you're always drawing when you were younger. Were
Always.
your parents artists? Were they designers? Was there an aunt or an uncle that sort of introduced you to the world a little bit?
I didn't know what a designer was till I went to college. I had no idea what that was. However, when I was in high school, I was known as being good at art. So I was the high school publicity chairman, and I made all the posters for the proms I never went to.
Awesome. So during that time where you're creating these posters for these events that you didn't attend, were you at all thinking, there's something here, there's some talent here, maybe I should pursue this?
I knew I wanted to go to art school.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to be an artist. I didn't know what kind of an artist I wanted to be. When I was in high school and junior high school, I used to take 3 buses down into Washington, D.C. I grew up in suburban Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And go to the Corcoran School of Art, and I would take Saturday classes in drawing and painting with other people. Some of them were adults. There were all kinds of people there doing drawing and painting, and I was really happy in that environment. So I knew I wanted to go to art school.
So you're wanting to pursue art. Was there a mentor or somebody along that path that pointed out the world of graphic design to you after seeing your skills, or how did you come to that world?
It was very simple. I went to Tyler, and I was terrible at anything in every graphic design course. You tried everything. In the first 2 years, they had this. As a matter of fact, in my freshman year, I had something called basic design, which was really the beginning of Swiss-oriented graphic design. And you cut out a black square, and you moved it around a page. And, you made white on white designs. None of these things had messages. It was really craft and sort of learning spatial relationships. I had a teacher named Bob Stein, and he just thought I was terrible because I was so messy. And at the end of the course, I thought, well, I'm never going to do anything like this. And he said to me, why are you here? And I said, because I want to be an artist. And he said, cooking is an art, complete, 6 foot down at the time. And years later, when I was working at CBS Records, he called me up and asked me to come down and talk to his class. At that time, it was at the School for the Arts in Philadelphia. And, he wasn't very nice to me, but I thought it'd be great to go back and see what that class was like. And I wondered what he'd say to me. And he introduced me to the class, and he said that I was now a graphic designer in New York designing record covers. And he said, I can take no credit for her success whatsoever.
Yeah. Did you or him elaborate on the story on how the first relationship happened or ended?
I don't really recall. It was just so funny that it sort of became pointless. And I was there to talk to the students about their futures. And I told the class I was sloppy. I was just the sloppiest designer there ever was. Mm-hmm. And then in my 3rd year, I had a teacher named Stephen Tarantel, and I took a course called graphic design. And I liked it because it was about ideas. And you made posters, which I had always made posters. I made them in high school. Mm-hmm. And posters had ideas in them. But I didn't know when I was making the school posters that I was being a graphic designer. I thought I was making art on these posters that had messages and had funny images, and I made jokes with them. And then I was doing it for real in a design class. And then in my junior year, I majored in design, and I had a teacher who changed my life, which was Stanislaw Zagorski. And he got me to understand typography.
See, that's the key I was looking for. Who was somebody flicked that switch and opened up that world for you? That's fantastic.
What happened was my messiness was always terrible. Mm-hmm. My thinking was good. And he would assign things like a book cover or a record jacket or a poster or a book, a whole book. And I would work with the technology of the time, which was press type. And what the kids in class did is they all had learned a little bit of Swiss modernism, and they'd take the Helvetica and they'd rub it down. It seemed like the only font that came in press type was either Universe or Helvetica. And you would rub it down in the corner, and they would have all their type flush left, rag right, very tight, very neat. And I would do the same thing, and mine would bubble and crack, and the lines would never be straight. And my illustrations and my ideas were good, but the type was terrible. So and Mr. Zagorski, who had a very thick Polish accent, said, "Image good, typography terrible." He said that to me all the time. And finally, he said to me, "Illustrate with type." And he said those 3 words, and he gave me my whole career. Because I suddenly realized that the things had form and they had spirit, and you could actually compose images with them, or you could set a tone with them, and that the possibilities were really limitless, and it was an incredible gift.
What a beautiful moment. The teacher with the thick Polish accent just lit the world up.
He lit everybody's world up, actually. He was known for it. And he would say things like, you wanted his approval so much, he would say things like, "Probably you should do over for me better." You hear that, and you go, "Oh," and you knew he was right.
I think your Polish accent is on point, Paula.
It's really what I can do. It still sticks in my head.
Awesome. Paula, what stands out to you as the most influential design of your life so far? Something that you saw and has just stuck with you since?
That's a good question. There are a lot of things that have stayed with me for various reasons. And what's easier for me to talk about is really the work I do in 3D and the things that influenced me there, because I remember them because they were so rare. In graphic design, I would have to say, obviously, pushpin. I married Seymour Quast, and he taught me how to see. And that Milton and Seymour, when I was in college, were my heroes. That their work was amazing, and so much of that stuff for me is iconic, and I remember it. I was less interested in Paul Rand. I appreciated him more later. But the artists and the thinking of Pushpin Studios in the 60s were fantastic. And also Victor Moscoso, who did Psychedelia and did a lot of the Fillmore work in the 60s. And of course, I thought that was great. But things that I remember that were more accidental were things that I saw on the street. And Burma Shave signs. When I was a kid, there was Burma Shave advertising. There was signs and sequences that told you a narrative. There was type on buildings. Like, I remember taking the train from New York to Philadelphia, and you would see this beautiful neon sign on the bridge over the Delaware River that said, "Trenton makes, the world takes." You to New York City, and there'd be a sign for the Holland Tunnel with the biggest type I ever saw in my life. It just said Holland Tunnel spaced out across where the cars came, and I was so small and it was so big. And then living in New York, I would see these crazy cryptic pieces of graffiti around the city. There was one when you drove through Park Avenue, and there was handwriting on the wall, and it said, "Instant this, instant that." I think it was all caps, but it was sort of done in a scripty kind of graffiti style.
Mm-hmm.
Another one called Wheels Over Indian Trails, and that was over the Midtown Tunnel when you came into Manhattan. And it was like a piece of poetry. And I always wondered who put it there, and I never found out until very recently because I was being given an award by the Society of Environmental Graphic Designers, and they asked me to talk about my influences, in which I just told you about. And I wanted to be able to show a picture of this thing, and I couldn't. I went online to find it, and I found it. And there, if you Google instant this, instant that, or Wheels Over Indian Trails, it actually can come up on your computer screen.
Awesome.
So astounded. And there's a real artist whose name I've since forgotten, but there was a person who did it, and apparently there were a lot of them, and there was a lot of writing about them, and it was kind of amazing. But that was something I saw in the 70s and the 80s, and when street graphics were really very prevalent. I remember Silence Equals Death as a graphic system that worked to, it was AIDS activism, is to make people aware of the AIDS community and what was going on in the gay community. And these things were very powerful because you came upon them seemingly accidentally, and you were always sort of mystified by them at first and then drawn to them.
Beautiful. So that's some of the past influences that you have. I'm going to go a little bit off the question document here and ask, what is the piece of design or art that you have seen most recently that really lit you up and made you smile? Could be street art. It could be a company rebrand.
It's really hard. There's this guy I saw who came from Brooklyn, and I bought his book, and I don't remember his name. Can you wait 1 minute?
Please,
I'm going to get it. I'm going to show it to you.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see it. Oh, cool. I'm sorry to send you running around.
This is Sam Reiser, and his work is stupendous. Let me see if I can just find a favorite page if I can. I like them all. Can you get that?
Oh, absolutely. That's incredible.
I mean, he's an illustrator and a typographer. He does a lot of work in the music industry, which I didn't even know. I came upon him at Rizzoli's when I was buying Christmas gifts, and I bought a lot of these. But they're just phenomenal. I want to see if I can. And then he does these really crazy, obsessive illustrations with them.
Wow. See, what you might not know is print. I love print. I am extremely passionate about print, and anything. I love seeing things on. Holy cow, that's incredible. Seeing something printed is just incredible.
You can buy the book online, and it comes from a music company. I forgot the name of the company. If you just Google Sam Reiser, welcome to the Dripper World of Sound and Vision by Sam Reiser.
Beautiful. Sam Reiser.
Yeah, Ryser.
Awesome. Look at that. Sam Reiser, you just got a shout out from Paula Scher. Beautiful. So the next question I have is a unique one to be asking you, because when I ask this question on the show, a lot of guests will say the work of Paula Scher and Pentagram. So now, Paula, I want to hear from you. Who are some of the designers or brands that you look up to and closely follow now? And what about them do you like?
Well, I have to think about it in terms of the folks I look up to, all of my partners. Mm-hmm. My partner, Michael Beirut, of course. My partner, Emily Oberman, who I think is doing amazing branding right now. Luke Heyman, who is just the best editorial designer I know, except for my newest partner, Matt Willie, who's just astounding. He used to do the Sunday Times Magazine and joined Pentagram. Georgia Lupi, who does incredible personalized data visualization. Eddie O'Para, who's a genius in just about every area. Natasha Jen is one of the most elegant designers I know. My partner, Michael Gerke, who has been doing environmental graphics and really showed me the way. And Abbott Miller, who is Mr. Elegant. What can I say?
Beautiful.
Those are all, they're the best. They're the best. And the ones in London are pretty amazing, too. And the list is so long, I'm not going to do it. But my partner, Loeb, who's a new join, is one of the best typographers I know.
Yeah, see, it's a long list, but what I appreciate that about is you know the list, and you could do the list.
Now, these people I'm very lucky because I'm around very talented people all the time, and that I can walk out into the space that's Pentagram where the designers all sit, and there are about 70 of them on computers, and you see something terrific on every screen. And you see things in works, and then you see how they change, and you just learn a lot, and that it's great to be around great people.
So what would you say is the most fulfilling part of your role at Pentagram?
I like my interaction with my partners. I'm on something called the Legal and Finance Committee, which sounds like it's just managing money, but it's really about how the partners are doing. So I get to know how they're doing and how they're feeling and can talk to them about it. And I like that. Mm-hmm. Not them.
It plugs you into the rest of the business and keeps everybody communicating and in tune with one another.
Well, it manages relationships. There isn't a Mr. Pentagram. There's no head. There's no leader. So sometimes people don't know where to go, or you. Sometimes you're having a really rough spell, like you might not be getting enough business, or you feel like things are tough on you, or you maybe have just joined, or there are all types of things like that. So I want to be part of the group in that way and be helpful.
Mm-hmm. All right, Paula. So the next question I have for you talks a little bit about print and packaging. And I want to hear how you have utilized print and packaging in your career and any stories or special projects that you've been a part of that you're really proud of.
Well, I worked on a packaging system that I love called Dr. Jart, which is a cosmetic company in Korea. And I worked with a fellow I know named Peter Vrankovich, who actually worked for me for a period of time. He's a product designer. And he worked for me for about a year and a half working on environmental graphics because he was in between jobs. And he had a wonderful way of dealing with materiality and dealing with form. And it was very exciting working with him. The typography is totally neutral. It's just Swiss Helvetica, which I rarely use because the packaging and the shapes of the packages really were beautiful, and the forms were great to hold in your hand. I love this series, and I'm really proud to have been part of it.
Definitely. So was that a surprising moment to you when you arrived on that Swiss Helvetica?
No, it was the only choice, because anything else you would do would be, you didn't want to compete with the form. You didn't want to, the best way, it was a white packaging with a yellow top. I hope you have an image of it from the Pentagram site.
I'll pull it up for sure.
And you just didn't want to go against that packaging. They were objects that you wanted to hold in your hand. I mean, we did other things with it. Like there was this plus symbol they had that we made. It has the ability to tell you what kind of product it is. So it sort of illustrates whether it's for, making smaller pores or smooth softening skin or whatever the thing is that the equipment does, the product. Mm-hmm. The package itself is so smart in the way it opens and the way it stands and the way you use it. It's both utilitarian and beautiful. So I love doing that. That was great.
That's a great one. So I'm going to share pictures of that so people can see exactly which ones that we're talking about here. All right, Paula, the next couple of questions take you down part of your career where you've likely made some mistakes, learned some lessons, and I'm going to just pull you through some of that and share those stories and the lessons learned with the listeners. In the end, I'll turn it around and we'll end in a happy place. What has been the most challenging time in your design career so far? Why was it challenging, and how did you get through it?
The most challenging time was when I was in my own business after I left CBS Records. And I had a business with my partner, Terry Coppell, and he was a magazine designer. And initially, we had a lot of success. We were considered what was called then retro designers. And we got a lot of work because of the kind of typography we did, because of a book we sent out called Great Beginnings, which was the style of famous. It was designed with the beginnings of famous novels in the style in which they were written. Mm-hmm. And that we were successful almost immediately. And then I got record business work from it as well, because I had been at CBS all those years. So record companies came to me at that time. I designed the identity for Manhattan Records and did a lot of covers for Blue Note Manhattan. So we grew very quickly in the early years, and Terry got new magazines that would be launched and invariably folded. In 1994, I designed this poster for Swatch Watch. I began doing the advertising for Swatch Watch in '83, and we did a normal advertising campaign for it. And then I went into the Swiss headquarters of Swatch that was in the Swiss Embassy in New York City and saw all these Herbert Matter posters. Called Muriel Matter, got a permission to use the posters and the ads, and stripped watches into them, and they were on a woman's arm. And they came out and they ran in Rolling Stone and in fashion magazines like Glamour, and then there was a poster for stores. And about, I would say 1980, the poster came out in '84, and about 1987, people started criticizing it heavily. And I remember Tibor Kalman really knocked it at some design symposium. And also, all of a sudden, I was really heavily criticized for this mass appropriation that some people called plagiarism, but it can't be plagiarism if you paid a permission to use the thing. So it was a parody, and it was done in the style of Herbert Matter deliberately because it was a Swiss company and he did Swiss posters, and so there was a connection for it. I show this thing to students now because they read about it in history books, and they don't understand it because it's so absurd in relationship to the kind of appropriation that really exists now. It's a big nothing. But at the time, I was horrified by it. And it coincided, the worst period, I think, was 1988 or '89. And it coincided with the Gulf War and the recession. And our business fell apart, and people were still writing negative things about that piece. And it didn't matter what else I did. I was sort of labeled with it. Mm-hmm. I a woman came up to me not that long ago when I was speaking at some conference someplace, and she said, when I was in school, you were the only woman in the design history books, and what they wrote about you was bad. That because it was that Swatch thing. Mm-hmm. And it also coincided with a scary fact that at the point of the worst part of it, and the worst part of the recession, my partner left and went to work at Esquire because we weren't making any money. And largely it was because he had no magazines to design because they stopped making them in the recession. And I was still staying in the business. And I realized that I was never going to get better work than the work I was already getting. And that I'd hit some level as a woman designer where I would never be believable as somebody they would hire to do a high-paid job. And just when things were the darkest and I wasn't sure what to do, Woody Pirtle came over, who I knew, and he had lunch with me, and he asked me if I'd be interested in joining Pentagram. And there weren't any women partners then, and I knew it would be really creepy to do because it would be rough being the only woman partner, because with the New York office and the London office, it was about 15 or 17 men and me. But I did it. And the whole thing was, I knew that I would never be able to go to the next level of as a designer, as a woman on my own. Now you could, but then you couldn't. And I did it, and it changed everything.
Wow. I like how you mentioned in there a number of times, the perspective of being a woman in design back then and the differences now. Being the sort of leader in the design community that a lot of women look up to, what do you see are the differences back then to now where, maybe things aren't easier for women to succeed, but are there more opportunities?
Well, I think that there are women you could name, and that helps. Mm-hmm. There were women you could name back then, but they disappeared. It's funny, there was a woman named C.D. Pinellas who was very important at Condé Nast and then the Dean of Parsons, and people rediscover her like she wasn't a big deal, and now she's been resurrected. She was a big deal. I mean, and she was one. She was the first woman to be inducted in the Art Directors Club Hall of Fame, and she was the first woman member from the United States in AGI. So she was a big deal. There was Ruth Ansell and Bea Feitler, who were a generation younger, and they were editorial designers. And Bea died young. She had cancer. And Ruth still works, but she wasn't, at a certain point, she wasn't getting the same kind of magazine leadership work that she had when she did, not Vogue, she did Bazaar. And Feitler did Harper's Bazaar. It's legendary. And she did some really incredible work for the Sunday New York Times Magazine, and went to Vanity Fair. I think she was the original art director of Vanity Fair when it launched. But these women had stellar careers, but they didn't seem to last long. And they didn't seem to attain the same kind of visibility and power as men did. And that, I think that's the wall that got broken down, is that women can be as visible and as powerful as men. Not a lot of them yet, but it's a one-by-one process, and it's growing all the time.
I would agree it's growing all the time. On the show, I've had many, many very talented female designers, and it's incredible. The work is incredible. So I want to get a little bit more specific now, Paula. Can you take us to a design or project that you were a part of that did not go well or bring the desired result? What was that like? How did that feel? Can you take us to that story?
Well, I actually have a story, but I can't tell you the client.
Nope. Names are usually kept out, for sure.
Okay. I worked on something. Okay, I've had 3 experiences in a row where I've invested a huge amount of time into things that did not get made.
Okay.
And that there were 2 projects in particular that were last year that were really frustrating, and I felt like I should have known better. In one of them, and they both involve politics in a way where I just should have been savvier. In one of them, the woman, and I hate it was a woman, but the woman who was theoretically promoted herself as the person who had the power in decision making and could put the project through the company was not really connected to her upper management at all. They didn't listen to her, and I did not get to meet with them. So that I found out very late in the game that this terrific thing that we had designed and packaging we had done and worked on for about 6 months wasn't going to get made, and that it wasn't going to get made because the president of the company hadn't seen it until the last minute and ruled it out without me being able to walk him through to the decision that would get it made. Mm-hmm. Generally, I do a lot of work directly with the people who are the decision makers, and that here somebody said it didn't matter, even though I said, shouldn't we be showing this at an early time? She says, no, he's given me carte blanche, and he hadn't. And I felt like a fool. I felt completely like a fool. So, and I really liked the work. I mean, a lot of times I design something and I'm just tired and the design isn't very good and somebody doesn't like it and they change it or they decide to do something else. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is when I've done it and I know it's terrific and I can't get it made. Mm-hmm. But on the heels of that, there was a bigger corporation where we went through the whole process. The president had not only seen it, he launched it himself at the board meeting, but he forgot to tell the founder of the company about it. And the founder of the company was very uncomfortable with it. And it's delayed, and I don't know if it's going to get made. I don't know if it's totally dead, but I don't know if it's going to get made. And the horrible thing for me is it was a whole year of my life and an investment in it that goes way beyond what I'm getting paid. It isn't that what I got paid was small. I can't pretend like it was a low fee. It's that the investment of bringing myself to the project and not having it made would be worse. like I've had situations where I've been stiffed on jobs, and it was a crummy job and a lousy fee, and I've been stiffed. I forget those because I don't absolutely care, because I have myself invested in it. But when I invest myself in something and it doesn't happen, I find it incredibly depressing, and it's sad, and I can't get over it. And I really feel the wound from it for a long time. And I feel like, how could I have let this happen?
So in those moments, are there red flags that you see and choose to ignore, or is there's nothing and you're blindsided?
There are probably red flags I should have ignored, but I don't know that I could have done anything about them. Mm-hmm. I couldn't have done anything about them because I didn't have access to the politics of the thing. Like usually if I'm driving the process very tightly, it's good. I do better in small companies than large companies. I do better in cultural organizations than I do in corporations. But I have to say that this one was a shock because the relationships seemed very good. And it was really not, it was just a fuck up. It wasn't, I'm allowed to say that on the radio.
That's all good.
Okay. It was just, the president forgot to tell the guy, and nobody knew it. If you went into why the thing happened, what happened was not the president's fault. He's president of a company. He's busy. It's a very big company. It's a Fortune 500 company. He's president of the company. He was supposed to show the founder this thing. He wanted to show the founder the thing because he knew the founder. He forgot to do it. And then what he did is he forgot that he forgot to do it. And he showed it at the board meeting where the founder was there, and he saw it for the first time, so he's offended. I don't think that's the president's fault. I think it's the fault of the hierarchy of the company, because there's a traffic manager who went around on every step of the way and all the people that had to be shown and made sure that I went in and gave presentations or made sure they were shown to it some separate way. Mm-hmm. And because it's at one higher stratosphere, nobody was informed that he didn't show anybody. So that's sort of like the whole of hierarchies within corporations. And I find that almost every problem I have with corporations, from the time I wrote Make It Bigger in 2002, where I talked about CBS records, it's always been the same thing, is that corporations are bad because corporations organize levels, and the levels do not communicate. And that somebody on the top winds up making a decision, doesn't have any clue about how anything happened along the way, or how they're supposed to behave in relationship to it, or how their staff feels about it. Nothing. And I hear when I speak at conferences and there's a Q&A, the questions people always ask me are these kinds of business questions, like, how do I get my boss to like it? Or I showed it to somebody and he didn't like it and went someplace else. And here, it wasn't that happened to me, but it was still a thing where the president didn't show the damn thing to somebody and their feelings were hurt. And that's the end of it. And like, what do you do about that? What do you do about that?
See, that's like asking, what do you do about human emotion? There's nothing.
There's no answer. There's no answer to it. But it really, another thing that was depressing, and this was also recently, was that I did a very big and important project for Disney, and I cannot show it because you're not supposed to work for Walt Disney. They mean it's the legal department. It's the legal department. They just don't let you do it. Mm-hmm.
I'm actually reading the book about the Disney CEO right now, Bob Iger. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, is it good?
Yeah, so far so good. I'm not a big reader, and I got halfway through it in a weekend. So,
wow.
Yeah, with 3 kids, so I was invested.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What was it about it? Why was it interesting?
I find I'm most interested in the stories about how people get to prominent positions. And it's part of what I enjoy so much about doing this podcast and talking to, whether it's a designer that's been in the industry for 2 years and is just getting their teeth cut, or, somebody in a position like yourself or an Aaron Draplin. Like, I love hearing the stories and the little interactions from mentors, from teachers, from parents, the little things they do that were seemingly minor at the time, but had huge impact on their career and the way they make their decisions and how they got to where they are. So the book is kind of like that. Through circumstance, through hard work, and through unique opportunities and unique interactions with others, he got to this position. And it's I just get really invested in stories like that.
Great.
So yeah, it's definitely a good one for sure. So the last tough one, and then we'll turn it around and we'll get to the happy stuff. What what is something that you're struggling with in your design career right now?
Well, my age.
27 is not old, Paula.
Well, I'm becoming a little bit of a groundbreaker in an area I never thought I would be a groundbreaker. I mean, I am the oldest partner of Pentagram. I have seen careers at Pentagram stop at about 62. I'm 71. I don't know what to expect. I don't think about it all the time, but I think about it sometimes and more because I don't really have a game plan. Like, I think I'm supposed to be deciding something. And I haven't done anything because I don't feel sick. I don't feel old, and I don't see any reason to change, and I don't feel like I'm not doing any good work. So I can't say that I've lost any enthusiasm for it, or I'm tired of it, or I'm not getting the work, or any of that. So I just feel like, how did I get to be this age? You asked what I'm struggling with. That's it.
And do you feel that that's sort of the perception of society that you should be making decisions, or is that something that you're feeling?
No, I think there's some expectation in that. And for me, what's tricky is the Pentagram thing. I think if I had my own business now and I was on my own, I would just do whatever I wanted to do. But I'm at Pentagram, and my partners are now, in their 30s, and I'm in my 70s, and I don't feel weird about it. They don't seem to feel weird about me. But when I had joined, the older partners all left, and they were in their early 60s when I was in my early 40s, and they went one by one. So the only partner that stayed till 70, which was Theo Crosby, died. Everybody else sort of left. So it's a strange position to wonder if I'm supposed to do that. And I guess I'll know it when it happens, but I think about it and I worry about it. I worry about whether or not that's the right thing to do, or should I be making some other plan, or but I didn't, and I haven't, and I probably won't.
So, there you go. Perfect. All right, Paula, I'm going to turn this bus around for you. And I
depressing, I think.
Yeah, sorry about that. I actually think this, well, maybe it won't be. I have a hunch this might be a harder question for you to answer than any of the other ones. Tell us about a project that you have been a part of that you are the most proud of, one that just makes your heart sing.
Well, there are many, to be honest with you.
That's why I thought it'd be tough.
And, I can't deny my love of the public theater, which I've been doing for 25 years and just wrote a book about that's coming out in April. Mm-hmm. And it is an incredible relationship. The work has highs and lows, but I'm proud of it all because I'm proud of the growth through it and everything I learned about identity design. It's sort of interesting. When I just started designing the public theater, I was doing it to make big posters out on the street that I thought everybody would see. Most of the people who saw them in annuals. They weren't out on the street. They couldn't afford much on the street. They had them inside the public theater, and a couple sniped on the street. And in the summer, they have this Shakespeare festival in the subway. And over the period of the 25 years, I was trying to figure out how to get this place noticed. And what was terrible was that when we had a big hit on Broadway, which was Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, and everybody knows what that looks like, everybody started imitating it. And, the public didn't have very much money. So everything in New York looked like that. So it was like New York City ate the public theater's identity. So then I had to go and sort of recreate it again. And then I redesigned it when a new director came on. And then recently, the past, I guess it's now 7 years, I realized the mistake I was making was to have it seen. It had to be repetitious because the public has a million programs and a lot of plays. And that I realized that if I did everything in the same style for a season, you'd recognize a season, not necessarily an individual show, but this amazing thing happened that when I started doing it, the membership went up because people began to recognize the totality of the place. And now it's really an institution, and I feel great about it. But actually, if you think about how people really see it, they go to the show and they take a picture of the poster on their playbill and they Instagram it. So I went from designing these really big things to really things that live in little spaces like that.
So
that's what that was.
So when you're designing for that, do you now have a little bit of a thought of like, what would this look like on Instagram?
Nah, screw Instagram. It looks good. It was always big type. It can't look bad on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. Totally true.
So, it's not like I'm designing a lot of text.
So that's another great example of, because I ask all my guests this question, and I would say 90% of the time, the project that they are the most proud to have been a part of is not the biggest name company they've worked for. It's not the biggest paycheck that they received from working with the company. It has been the one for the nonprofit down the street that they did comp work for. It was for the food bank that they helped increase donations for. Like, it was the stuff from the heart, designed from the heart. And it sounds like that's a very similar case for you.
Well, all of my work was like that. I was going to say the other project I'm really proud of, and I'm really redoing right now to a degree, is the High Line. I designed the logo for it for free. But then I worked for them for until it launched. Then they developed an in-house art department, and I would consult occasionally. And now what happened was I did all the signs for the High Line, and the signs for the High Line were designed to be fairly invisible. They worked on a low level. They were on railings, or they were in the ground, and all the vegetation grew up around them, and nobody can see them. And nobody they're on. So now I got to go back and make vertical. We're re-signing the whole place. I think we worked on the signage in maybe 2006 to 2008 when it opened, and now we're going back and doing the whole thing all over again. My logo is 20 years old, and they've changed it. They won't touch it. It exists, and the signage is going to be the same type style that we designated, and that stays. But we got to go and figure out how you get seen after all those trees. Not only that, their Hudson Yards opened, and that's this huge development place, and there are 1 million people on there, and they're confused, and they don't know where to go, even though the thing goes one way or another way. They still need signs. So that's a project I really love, and that I love being involved in. I've had wonderful work and great clients. I mean, I was very lucky to be in the record industry for 10 years and to learn as a very young designer. I was, started in that industry when I was 23. And I made hundreds of record covers that still are around someplace. And that in the 80s, I was lucky to do these youth-oriented businesses. And at Pentagram, I've just been able to work with so many wonderful not-for-profits and museums, and I really like them all. And I have some nice work right now, so I'm happy.
Beautiful. I love that you're happy there. What I find really interesting is a lot of my guests came to design through music, through the music industry, whether that was playing in a band or working for a record store. And it's all started with a poster, or it all started with a basic CD cover or a t-shirt design for a show or something like that. And by doing that, they realized, I really enjoy this. This is really cool. People are reacting and interacting with my work. And that just flicked a switch for them.
It does. I mean, you make a thing and it goes out into the universe. And, in the 70s, when I was a record cover art director, there was no marketing. I mean, they didn't test anything or look at the thing. You made it and it went out into the universe. It was all over the world. It was global. I mean, the things are still around. Any record I say that I designed, whether I like it or not, you say the name, you type it into your Google, and my image comes up. Images that are 45 years old. I mean, I hate the Boston cover, and everybody knows what it is. I mean, I'll never get away from that.
Yeah, I was literally just about to ask you, is there one piece, or maybe two, that are out there that you see every once in a while and go, oh, Paula, what were you thinking?
Well, the Boston cover, there's nothing that comes close to that. There are things that I wish I had done a little bit different. The Boston cover I overtly hate. And I hate it even more because it seems to be the one everybody knows. And I was listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me about a year or two ago. I designed the cover in 1976. And I was listening 2 years ago to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on at National Public Radio. And there's a talk show host named Peter Sagal, and he makes up fake questions, and that the audience, the guests have to figure out which question is fake or real or something like that. I'm probably not telling you right. And apparently one of the questions centered around the Earth blowing up and spaceships leaving the Earth. And he said, like the Boston cover.
No.
And it was 2018, and they used Boston cover as it's an analogy for this thing, and it doesn't make any sense. Why would anybody know what that is? Why doesn't that die? Why doesn't that go away? And it's never going to die or go away. It's just going to be there. And my team put this here.
Oh, beautiful. They put it there as just...
They went out and bought it. It's got a broken record inside it.
It just shows your impact on the world, Paula.
Well, that may be it. There was a guy in the 70s when I did the cover. You know what he said to me? He says, when you die, your tombstone's going to say, design the Boston cover. Oh my God.
Oh, you have to have a sense of humor when somebody says that.
Well, but what I think is fascinating is we forget about how we influence culture and what we remember. I know from the public theater work and the work I did for other institutions in New York, people will call up and they want to buy a poster from me, and it's usually something I designed that was out on the street, and you find out, why do you like that one? And I always think, maybe they like the way I did the type on that. And really what you find out is, that's when I first moved to New York and I met my husband, or that's where we had our first date, or that's where, and people have the emotional connections to a thing they saw at a specific moment in time, and that becomes unshakable.
So in this sort of digital design world that we're living in, Paula, where do you feel the relevance and importance of print and packaging sits in this space? Like, do designers still need to know that?
Sure. Still exists. Mm-hmm. Everybody's saying print is dying and dead for the, past million years. I mean, I read the New York Times online. I don't buy the newspaper every day except for Sunday because I like it. But I think that there are some things that just work better in print. If you don't live in a city, you don't see how much stuff actually exists out on the street. If you walk around New York City or you go to LA and you look at the billboards or what's out there, it's a phenomenal amount of stuff. There are banners, there are bus shelters, there are things that are sniped on walls, there's signs. I mean, that stuff is not virtual. It's there, it's real. Sometimes it even moves. Mm-hmm. But people are making that all the time. And then there are things that exist only online. The things that exist only online can be memorable, especially if you see them repetitively, but a lot of them disappear. The things that street last.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that younger designers are missing the understanding of print design and the intricacies of it?
Not the ones that work at Pentagram.
Love it. I like that.
No, I think it's where you work. If you work completely on on building and changing and updating a website, you might see the world through that lens. We design websites, but we don't maintain them every day. Mm-hmm. So it's not, everybody's sitting on a computer doing work. I can see out, and I'm a chef. Sorry, you can't turn the camera into this direction because there's a whole room full of people working and there's stuff on screens. And you see the screens all the time in the building and stuff on the screens, but some of the things live online. Some of the things are public spaces. Some of the things are identity that get used on myriads of product, mm-hmm. whether it's packaging or whether it's some kind of magazine or publication or book. Those things exist. Mm-hmm. People actually make books.
Definitely. Well, Paula, have you reached the point of the show for the Ask It Forward question? It's one of my favorite parts. That's where I have a question for you from my last guest, and you get the opportunity to ask a question of my next guest. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but you can ask them anything.
Okay.
Now, what I love about doing this is when I have a well-known designer on after somebody, and I say, you're not going to know who you're asking this question of, They have no frame of reference. They have nothing that they can tie to your career or certain projects that you're known for. So they're just shooting in the dark.
Okay.
So this question comes from Johnny Black and Richard Roach from Cast Iron Design out of Boulder, Colorado. They have done some really, really cool things recently, like a print project where they used kelp ink for printing a booklet for Patagonia. There's just some really cool stuff that they've done. And they wanted to ask you, what is the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you?
Oh, dear.
Don't say the Quickie Podcast, please.
No, it's very difficult. I'm trying to remember. So much embarrassing stuff has happened to me. I'm rarely embarrassed. There's got to be a story that this one, but I want.
You have to share it now, Paula. It's out there.
Oh, this is really terrible. I don't know if I can tell you this. I don't know if I can tell you this publicly. It had to do with. No, I can't. I'm sorry. It just had to do. I will tell you the parameter of it, but then not the specifics.
If you say it out loud and it sounds bad, I edit it out.
A speech when I really had to pee.
We'll just leave that there.
But nobody knew. It was a great talk.
Perfect. So when you're about to actually, it just made me think of something else. When you're about to go out and give a talk to a large crowd of people, do you still get nervous? How do you prepare for that? Or do you just go out there and go for it?
I'm really nervous about it. I've been doing this so long. I've probably spoken more than a normal designer in the same arena, largely because for so much of my career, there were only a couple of women. So that there would be a panel and they'd have to get a woman. So, I would get a call, why would you do this? It's really hard to get a woman speaker. That was a lot of my life. So I ended up speaking more than most people. April Greiman and I are the same age, and we met each other for the first time on stage, where we heard each other's name at an AIGA conference. We bent down and looked at each other and waved. We never had met each other because they would only get one woman generally. So how would I meet another woman?
Yep. Wow.
They weren't there. They would just get their obligatory woman.
Mm-hmm. Now, I actually have two Ask It Forward questions for you because I let one of my previous guests, one of my friends, know that I was interviewing you in a couple of days, and he said, please, please, please ask this question. So this one comes from Joshua Ariza. He's a commercial artist and owner of Chomp brand. And he wanted to ask you specifically, Paula, with Pentagram having the name that it does, everybody knows Pentagram and the work that comes out of Pentagram. How do you handle online criticism when there's so many people out there with an opinion?
Well, I've become inured to it. I've had so much bad criticism and proven wrong. They're often proven wrong. Like I remember when I first designed the new school in Parsons, which is still one of my favorite identities, and it launched, and everybody trashed it, and they trashed it, and they trashed it, and they trashed it, and oh, it's terrible, and Parsons had me come down and answer mean tweets and stuff. I mean, it was just this unending nastiness. And then this funny thing happened. The kids in the school, the seniors who really hated it, graduated, and they went away. And the next generation was just totally fine with it. And that was their identity. Reactions to things online are reactionary because it's exactly what you're doing. You're looking at it, and generally your response is negative because something you like may have changed, or you just may be dissing the famous designer, which is sometimes the other case of it. It could be dangerous to client situations. Like if clients come across it, they can wonder, it's bad for design. The design community really shouldn't do it. It's really irresponsible. There are sites that are responsible about it, and there are sites that aren't. The thing to do is the people that run the sites really should take out like overtly nasty or personal comments. Saying this sucks is not a serious review.
No.
I mean, really, really stupid. And I can't figure out why people go there. I don't know I don't know if it's a frustration that they don't have enough work, or they, it's a peer thing that goes on, but it seems not great. It's not great for design.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, you know, when my identity for Windows launched in 2012, I couldn't go out of the house for a week. You know, like, it can't be any worse than that.
Can't get worse than that.
Yeah, I just like sort of like I'm amazed at how over the top it can get and how intensively involved people are in it. And that part I think is interesting about design. People seem to desperately care about whether or not a logo is redesigned or not. But you know, the criticism part is serious if it makes it difficult to design. That anything that makes it difficult for a designer to work and be able to work and be able to make their clients less fearful is bad. Mm-hmm. Period.
So have you ever had somebody come up to you on the subway and say, hey, that logo you did, I don't like it?
Yeah.
Have you really?
Not quite like that, but after Abstract, yes, everybody knew who I was. So people do come up to me and say things. So they're not usually like that.
Yeah.
Or they might say, I really like this one. I don't like that one that much. You know, they'll say stuff like that.
And you say, thanks, can I get back to my lunch now?
Sometimes one woman came running over to me and said, you're Paula Scher, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And she says, I like your shoes. And I thought, okay.
That's the kind of feedback you want.
That's sort of what they do.
Beautiful. Paula, you have reached the end of the Quickie Podcast. Thank you so much for being my guest today. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it.
Take care.